It started as any ordinary school year. The kids in Ms. Harper's class adored her from the very first day. She was young, full of energy, and brought a fresh, fun approach to teaching that made learning an adventure. Whether it was turning math problems into games or incorporating dance into history lessons, Ms. Harper knew how to capture her students' attention. She didn't just teach, she inspired. But there was something else that made Ms. Harper stand out: her style. Every day, she came to work dressed in bold, trendy outfits. She loved fashion and expressed herself with vibrant clothes, form-fitting dresses, and eye-catching accessories. Her students loved her for it. They saw her as a role model, someone who was confident, creative, and unapologetically herself. To them, Ms. Harper wasn't just a teacher. She was the coolest adult they knew. However, not everyone shared the same admiration. As the weeks went by, parents started to notice how she dressed during pickup and drop-off. Whispers began to circulate. Is this appropriate for school? Should a teacher be dressing like that in front of children? Before long, those whispers turned into phone calls. The school's office was flooded with complaints from parents who claimed her appearance was distracting. Despite the backlash, Ms. Harper continued to dress in her signature style, believing it had no impact on her ability to teach and connect with her students. She knew she was doing her job well, and the feedback from the kids confirmed it. Yet, the complaints didn't stop. Concerned parents began questioning the school's leadership, asking why someone like her had been hired in the first place. One day, after a particularly heated round of complaints, Ms. Harper was called into the principal's office. The air felt heavy as she sat down across from Principal Edwards. He was an older man, known for his strict adherence to rules, but even he had always praised Ms. Harper for her teaching methods. However, this conversation wasn't about her teaching. With a sigh, Principal Edwards began, "Ms. Harper, we've been receiving a lot of calls from parents about your attire. They feel it's too distracting for the classroom environment. It's causing issues, and we need to address it." Ms. Harper's heart sank. She knew where this was heading. "I don't mean to make this personal," the principal continued, "but the parents have concerns about the way you present yourself. They say it's affecting their children's focus. I'm afraid we have no choice but to let you go." Tears welled up in her eyes. Ms. Harper left the principal's office, devastated. She wasn't just upset about losing her job, she was heartbroken, because it felt like the passion and love she poured into teaching had been overshadowed by something as superficial as her wardrobe. It felt deeply unfair. But this wasn't the end of her story. As Ms. Harper reflected on the situation, her sorrow turned into determination. She knew that this wasn't just about how she dressed. It was about deeper biases and discrimination. It wasn't her clothes that had been a problem, it was society's discomfort with her body and the way she chose to express herself. She was a professional, an educator, and she believed she had been unfairly targeted for something that had no bearing on her abilities as a teacher. With the support of friends, family, and even a few parents who saw the situation for what it truly was, Ms. Harper decided to fight back. She filed a lawsuit against the school for wrongful termination and discrimination, claiming that she was let go not because of her teaching performance, but because of how her body was perceived in the outfit she wore. The case quickly gained attention. People began debating, was it the school's responsibility to ensure teachers dressed a certain way, or had Ms. Harper been unfairly judged based on outdated standards of what a professional woman should look like? As the lawsuit proceeded, more stories of women facing similar challenges came to light. Ms. Harper's case wasn't just about her anymore, it became a symbol for women who had been judged, criticized, and even penalized for their appearance in professional settings. Months later, the verdict came in. Ms. Harper won her case, and the court ruled that her termination had indeed been based on discriminatory grounds. The school had to not only compensate her, but also reevaluate its policies regarding staff appearance. Ms. Harper's victory wasn't just legal, it was symbolic. She had proven that passion, dedication, and skill were what truly mattered, not the shape of one's body or the style of one's clothes. In the end, Ms. Harper returned to teaching, this time at a new school that embraced her for who she was, not what she wore. And while she never changed her bold style, what really stood out to her new students was her commitment to their learning and her belief that they, too, could be unapologetically themselves. And the parents, well, they had to admit there was something undeniably powerful about a teacher who wasn't just teaching the curriculum, but also teaching by example. Be yourself. Stand tall. Never let anyone dim your light. The community's reaction to Ms. Harper's victory was mixed, but overwhelmingly, her story resonated with many. News outlets picked it up, framing it as a modern-day David versus Goliath, a young, passionate teacher who stood up against a system that tried to box her in based on appearance. Women's rights groups championed her as an example of the daily struggles women face when trying to navigate professionalism, self-expression, and the expectations of others. Parents across the city began talking. Some who had initially complained about Ms. Harper's clothing found themselves reflecting on the deeper issues. Was it really about her clothes, or had they been influenced by their own ingrained biases and assumptions? A few even reached out to her directly to apologize, realizing that their children had loved and respected Ms. Harper for her teaching, not how she looked. They admitted that in their desire to protect their children, they had lost sight of what was truly important, the quality of the education their kids were receiving. The lawsuit and the surrounding media attention forced many schools to reconsider their policies on appearance. Dress codes that were often vague or outdated were scrutinized, and conversations began about how to balance professionalism with personal expression in the workplace. Ms. Harper's case was setting a precedent she hadn't just fought for herself. She had ignited a movement that was rippling through educational institutions nationwide. But for Ms. Harper, the aftermath of the lawsuit wasn't just about policy change or public attention. It was personal. She had spent months feeling judged, misunderstood, and ostracized by the very community she loved. Winning the lawsuit had been empowering, but it didn't erase the pain of losing her job and the daily joy of teaching her students. Her story, however, didn't end with the courtroom victory. Ms. Harper wasn't the type to let bitterness or defeat define her. After taking some time to reflect on everything that had happened, she decided to use her experience to help others. She began writing a blog, sharing her story in more depth, offering advice to women in similar situations, and discussing the balance between professionalism and individuality. Her blog quickly gained a following, with readers resonating with her message of authenticity, courage, and resilience. In time, Ms. Harper was invited to speak at educational conferences, universities, and women's empowerment events. She talked about the importance of not just accepting, but celebrating who you are no matter what anyone else says. There's always going to be someone who thinks you don't fit the mold, she would tell her audiences. But here's the secret: you were never meant to. Your unique self is your greatest strength. With her newfound platform, Ms. Harper also became an advocate for teachers. She worked to shed light on the pressures they face not just from students or the administration, but from society at large. The expectations placed on educators were immense, and Ms. Harper wanted to remind the world that teachers are human too. They have passions, personalities, and should be allowed to express themselves just as much as anyone else. After some time, Ms. Harper was offered a teaching position at another school, this one known for its progressive policies and inclusive culture. She accepted the offer, but with a new sense of purpose. This time, she wasn't just teaching subjects, she was teaching her students the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Her first day back in the classroom was filled with nervous excitement, but as soon as she saw the eager faces of her new students, she knew she was right where she belonged. The students loved her instantly, just as they had before. They loved her for her creativity, her passion, and the way she made every lesson come alive. And they loved her for her style, bold, unapologetic, and authentically Ms. Harper. This school embraced her for who she was, quirks and all, and it became clear that the journey had led her to a place where she was meant to be. As the years went on, Ms. Harper continued to make an impact both in and out of the classroom. She remained a beloved teacher, but she also became a mentor to other educators, helping them navigate the challenges of being both professional and true to themselves. Her blog turned into a book, which inspired countless readers with her story of resilience and determination. Through it all, Ms. Harper never lost sight of what mattered most to her students. They were always her priority, and she continued to inspire them not just to learn, but to live boldly and confidently no matter what anyone said. And though she had faced incredible challenges along the way, she wouldn't have changed a thing. Her fight for her right to be herself had changed her life and the lives of others in ways she never could have imagined. In the end, Ms. Harper's story wasn't just about a battle over clothes, it was a story about courage, self-acceptance, and the power of standing up for what you believe in. She taught her students one of the greatest lessons of all: no matter what the world throws at you, stay true to yourself, because that's where your real power lies. And in doing so, Ms. Harper proved that sometimes the most important lessons aren't taught from a textbook, they're taught by example. As Ms. Harper settled into her new life, her influence continued to expand beyond the walls of her classroom. Her story began to take on a life of its own, reaching audiences far and wide who saw themselves in her struggle for acceptance and authenticity. What started as a local news story soon evolved into a national conversation. Her case became a touchstone in debates about dress codes, gender discrimination, and workplace expectations. She was invited to participate in panels on education reform, where she spoke passionately about the need for school environments that foster creativity and individuality not just in students, but in teachers too. The conversation she sparked didn't just focus on appearance. They delved into deeper issues of what it meant to be a teacher in a world that often placed form over substance. One day, she received a surprising email. It was from a group of parents at her old school, the same ones who had once complained about her. The email began with a heartfelt apology. The parents explained that in hindsight, they realized they had been wrong. They had judged her too quickly, focusing on superficial aspects like clothing rather than the undeniable impact she had on their children. The letter ended with a request. They asked Ms. Harper if she would consider returning to the school, not as a teacher, but as a consultant to help the administration rethink their approach to education and inclusivity. The offer was tempting, but Ms. Harper knew that her journey had led her to where she was for a reason. Still, she saw this as an opportunity to create lasting change, not just for herself, but for future teachers and students who might face similar challenges. After some thought, she accepted the offer on one condition: that the school commit to making meaningful changes in their policies and culture, starting with an overhaul of the dress code that had sparked her termination. The school agreed, and Ms. Harper began working with the administration on a series of workshops aimed at creating a more inclusive and supportive environment. She led discussions on implicit bias, helping staff and parents alike recognize the ways in which they might unconsciously judge others based on appearance. She also worked with the students, empowering them to embrace their own individuality while learning to respect the differences in others. The changes weren't easy. There were growing pains, as there often are when old mindsets are challenged. But slowly, the school began to transform. Teachers felt more comfortable expressing themselves, not just through their clothing, but in their teaching styles and interactions with students. The students, in turn, became more open-minded and empathetic. Ms. Harper's influence could be felt in every corner of the school. Meanwhile, her blog continued to gain traction. Readers from all walks of life connected with her message of resilience, authenticity, and self-worth. Many of them shared their own stories of being judged or marginalized for the way they looked, and they found strength in Ms. Harper's journey. She began receiving invitations to speak at events far beyond the world of education, corporate workshops, women's leadership conferences, and even TED Talks. Her message was universal. You don't have to change who you are to fit someone else's expectations. Your value isn't defined by how you look. It's defined by the passion, talent, and love you bring into the world. As her influence grew, so did her resolve to make lasting change. Ms. Harper used her platform to advocate for policy reforms that would protect individuals from being unfairly judged or terminated based on their appearance. She pushed for clearer, more inclusive dress codes across industries and helped raise awareness about the impact of body shaming and appearance-based discrimination in the workplace. But even with all the success and recognition, Ms. Harper never lost sight of her true passion, teaching. No matter how many conferences she attended or accolades she received, she always returned to her classroom. Her students were her joy, and they remained her top priority. Every day, she showed up for them, not just as their teacher, but as a living example of what it meant to be courageous, authentic, and unapologetically yourself. Years later, Ms. Harper's story would be told and retold, not just as a lesson in perseverance, but as a testament to the power of standing up for what you believe in. She didn't just change a school or win a lawsuit, she changed the conversation about what it means to be a professional, a teacher, and a woman in today's world. As she stood at the front of her classroom one afternoon, looking out at the bright, eager faces of her students, Ms. Harper felt a sense of peace. She had fought hard for her place in the world, and in doing so, she had opened doors for others to walk through. Her legacy wasn't just in the lessons she taught, but in the lives she had touched students, teachers, parents, and strangers who had all found strength in her story. And as she smiled at her class, preparing to dive into another exciting lesson, she knew one thing for sure: she was exactly where she was meant to be. She was a teacher through and through, and nothing, not even the fiercest of critics, could take that away from her.